98.1 FM.
KHTS 98.1 FM, AM 1220, your hometown station. Carl Goldman with you. Special 1 hour broadcast. You are going to be in for a treat because we have with us one of our founding fathers. And for all of us who live in Santa Clarita, we take so much for granted and really we don't take time to look back and see how did all this happen. And over the next hour, we're going to learn about that. Carl Boyer III is with me. As I said, one of the original city council members. He was has been mayor 2 times here in Santa Clarita. Prior to that, very involved in Santa Clarita before we became a city. You served on both the College of the Canyons board, one of the trustees there, right when the school was about to start, right? Back in the 70s? Is that correct?
I was elected to the board in 71, and it was after, I think, 1 full term.
So 1 full, but there toward the beginning, and then it served on our water board as well. And more importantly, you documented so much of the city in a great historical book called Santa Clarita that you first published in 2005. I just learned you updated it a bit. But if there's anyone who knows about the history of Santa Clarita and really was a piece of the history of Santa Clarita, you were it. And you kind of fell into it accidentally. Can you share that story, how you got into your own involvement?
Well, some developers wanted to build an automobile dealership across a residential street from the condominium where I lived. And we were trying to deal with the county, and at that time it was a long-distance phone call just to call our local government. And it finally occurred to me that we'd be a whole lot better off with local government.
And that was the start of it, and you weren't alone with that. There was a whole group of folks who realized that Santa Clarita needed to become its own entity. And back in those days, we're talking Santa Clarita became a city in 1987, and we'll get everyone caught up there. But prior to 1987 and cityhood, there was a movement to make it its own county. And you were part of that as well. How did that evolve?
Well, the reason I was part of the county movement was because people kept saying, "Oh, Carl, we like county government." And so I thought, well, if we like county government, we should form our own county. I didn't particularly care as long as we could have local government. We didn't have to cross 2 mountain ranges to get to the Hall of Administration.
Santa Clarita at the time was made up of, and still is made up, but back then they were their own communities, and the anchors for Santa Clarita that merged into the city are Valencia, Newhall, Saugus, and Canyon Country. Of course, here in the Santa Clarita Valley, we also have a number of other areas that are in the unincorporated area, the county areas, like Stevenson Ranch, Westridge, Castaic, Agua Dulce, that are all part of the Santa Clarita Valley, Valverde, and a few other smaller communities as well. The move to make it a county was back in the earlier 80s. That failed, right? It was a ballot measure that failed.
We were on the ballot twice, in 1976 and 1978, and it failed because the people from the remainder of Los Angeles County got to vote on the issue, and they voted not to let us go. Here in the Valley, it was overwhelming support in favor of our own county.
But back in 1978, you only had 4 people living in the Valley.
No, that's not true. We had 5 people elected to the Board of Supervisors who didn't get to serve.
Yeah, no. When we moved here, when Jerry and I moved here, which was 1990, the population of the entire valley, not just the incorporated area, was 130,000. Today, that number is 300,000. So just in the time we've been here, the 28 years we've been here, the valley has tripled in size. As you're driving around and you see the signs of population, and Shane here was born here and grew up here, and I know, Shane, you've seen the markers as you've driven. It usually says 214,000 to 22,000. It keeps changing, but those are the numbers of the people who live in the city. And
Yes.
then, of course, we have everything in the unincorporated area. So as you're driving up the 5 right now, everything on the left-hand side is all in the unincorporated area. And then we have pockets up off of Copper Hill. We have pockets over off of Plaza Rita that are also in the unincorporated area. But you didn't you had a long gap, Carl, from 1978 and the failure of it becoming a county to 1987. Nine years went by before a city. What was happening during that time?
Virtually nothing. What happened was that after 1978, people were just totally exhausted. We had put a huge effort into forming the county. It took almost 6 months for the petition drive in 1976. But in 1978, the people were well informed, and when we got to the door, they said, "Oh yeah, here, let me sign it," and they yelled for the rest of the family to come up and sign also. It took 6 weeks to do a petition that normally would take 6 months, but it just wore us out.
So we're going to fast forward in a second. We're talking to Carl Boyer, former mayor, city council member, founding father here in Santa Clarita on your hometown station. Going way back in history, a good chunk of the land here in Santa Clarita was owned by Newhall Land. It was ranch and farming country. Everything, at least on the west side of Santa Clarita, was that. And then the Newhalls and Newhall Land got smart, and they brought in a developer and one of the first of the urban or suburban planners, Victor Gruen, who really laid out Valencia and planned a community and were instrumental in the early stages of Santa Clarita and then later the merging of Santa Clarita. Talk for a minute or two about Newhall Land and their involvement.
Well, Newhall Land was literally involved in the very beginning of the county movement.
So they wanted it to become a county.
I wouldn't say they wanted it, but they had a positive attitude. There were 10 of us that were invited over to the Newhalls in their mansion in Piru, and we had dinner and we talked about county formation, and Newhall Land was involved, and it was unanimous that we should do something.
And the Newhalls, that back then you're talking about Scott and Ruth.
Scott and Ruth Newhall, yes.
Who were really, the anchors of this community. But Newhall Land, as time evolved, mapped out Valencia, built all the homes and all the infrastructure, and also had the foresight to realize we needed to have businesses here, so the business parks that we have, and really what we know of Santa Clarita today all was anchored in because of the planning and foresight that Newhall Land had.
And we attempted to bring in a lot larger area into the city than was finally approved by LAFCO, the Local Agency Formation Commission, under the dictatorship of Ruth Bunnell.
So were you trying to bring in the entire valley into it?
We were trying to bring in about 150 square miles, which were within the Consolidated Fire Protection District, and therefore would not cause anybody to have to pay any more taxes. And she just cut it down and cut it down and cut it down until it was 39 square miles, and had even left out Sand Canyon and some other areas that we just simply couldn't understand what was going on. And we were finally able to bring some of those places back in.
And then, of course, over time, the neighborhoods, as they got built out, also became incorporated into the city. So we've seen in just the 28 years I've been here, we've seen a lot more of the geography of the valley merge in and become part of the city. And eventually, the goal would be to have all of that become under cityhood and part of the city as everything continues to get developed.
I think the unfortunate thing is that there are areas of the valley where people are suffering from inertia. And they don't realize that they're paying more in taxes than we are. They somehow think that a city is an extra layer of taxes, which which it could be in theory, but as a practical matter, we just take over some of the services that used to be provided by the county and replace those taxes with more efficient city government. And the fact is that the areas that are outside the city now will never have their own local government because they won't have the automobile dealerships and
Right, they won't have the financial
right.
support needed for it, the commercial support. And one of the other reasons to have cityhood was exactly what you said, but to elaborate on that, we spend more money leaving Santa Clarita, going into the county and getting dispersed and not seeing that money coming back in services than keeping that money here in Santa Clarita and doing it much more efficiently.
People had a really hard time understanding that we would be much better off as a city until the revenues just started rolling in. And we had $50 million in our city treasury before we could even figure out how to spend any of it.
Right. And we've seen so many examples where local government is in most instances, at least local government when it's run well, as has been the case here in Santa Clarita, is very preferable to larger government coming from the outside and not understanding the area.
Absolutely. We would just about get to the point where a county supervisor would really be familiar with our area and our problems, and then they would be termed out.
Or in the case where we have a very strong county supervisor who's very supportive of Santa Clarita right now, but she's only one vote out of five.
Out of five.
And the other four could care less about Santa Clarita and do not have our interests at heart. And so a lot of things that we should be getting and a lot of support is falling through because of the other four supervisors.
We still need our own county.
You know, that's a whole different subject. We're talking with Santa Clarita, former Santa Clarita Mayor Carl Boyer, City Council member, learning about the history of Santa Clarita and some of our challenges. And we're going to talk about the future as well before our hour's up. But I still am fascinated about the history and some of the changes that have taken place with Santa Clarita over the years. And initially, some of the structure that we currently have, for instance, we made a decision early on to have LA County Fire cover everything here. We made a decision to have the county sheriffs cover here, but in the sheriff's case, we contract out, so we have our own sheriff's station. We have someone in charge of the sheriffs here that reports to both downtown and the sheriff's office downtown and to our city council. How did all that evolve?
Basically, it was figured that particularly with a 39 square mile city, there were going to be a lot of problems with jurisdiction. And we didn't want a sheriff's car crossing the city limits and worrying about whether they had the right to enforce the law on one side or the other. So it seemed absolutely logical to contract with the sheriff's department. As far as county fire is concerned, there were times in the first 15 years of cityhood where we had to consider creating our own fire department, and then county fire woke up to the fact that we needed some more fire stations, and I think they've been providing excellent service.
Yeah, they've been doing a fabulous job over the years. So now let's rewind the tape here. It's 1986, 1987. How did cityhood come about at that time?
We had to go through a whole process, and quite frankly, I don't remember every step of the process, but we had to file a map of the proposed city, and I believe offhand, I think Ruth Newhall drew that up. I know she drew up the county map.
And then was it put to a vote?
And then we had to petition to have an election. And once the petition was submitted, the Board of Supervisors had to decide when we were going to be allowed to vote. There were 4 supervisors who were attending the meetings because Kenny Hahn had been very, very ill for a long time.
Kenny Hahn was our supervisor at the time.
No, he was second district supervisor.
Okay, got it.
So we had the support of our supervisor and one of the others, and opposition of Pete Shabaram and one of the other supervisors. So I went down along with a couple of other people, and we talked to Kenny Hahn's chief deputy. And we said, look, we're not asking him to come in to the supervisors if it's going to hurt his health. But if he can make the meeting where it's going to be decided when the election date will it be in November, or will we have to wait until the following June or July? We'd really appreciate him being there. And Kenny Hahn showed up in a wheelchair, cast his vote in favor of allowing us to be on the December ballot, and then left.
On the ballot, who could vote? Any registered voter in LA County?
That's the wonderful thing about cityhood. No. The only people who could vote were the people who were living within the proposed boundaries of the city.
Perfect. So, of course, it won, and in 1987, Santa Clarita became a city made up of Canyon Country, Valencia, Newhall, and Saugus, at least most parts of those four. Take us now to the creation of the first city council. How did you end up one of the original members?
I guess probably I had more public exposure because of a long series of letters that I had written to the editor of the Newhall Signal. I really didn't campaign much. I think I raised $1,100, but I went door to door as much as I could, and my basic question was, what would you like to know about this cityhood formation? And I really didn't campaign for myself.
How many folks were on that ballot the first time out?
25.
25 on there, and 5 were selected, and those 5 were you, our first mayor, who became our congressman, Buck McKeon, Joanne Darcy,
right,
I believe was part of that. Also, Dennis Kuntz was part of that. And who am I missing?
Jan Haidt.
Jan Haidt was on the first one,
Yeah. Buck and Jan raised a lot of money. And a lot of money. They spent about $15,000 each. It's peanuts compared to what's being spent today.
But back then it was a lot of money. So cityhood took place, the first city council meeting. We actually found a videotape. Someone had a video of the first city council meeting, and we actually have it. You can go onto YouTube, and in fact, I'll send you a link because I think you'll find it interesting. But we actually archived it, and we have the first ever city council meeting on there. You need to have some popcorn and some other things to watch it, but it's an interesting snapshot and a piece of history.
Some of the early meetings went till 2 a.m. It was a little rough for a while.
What would you say were your biggest challenges as a council back then when the city first formed? What were the toughest things you had to face early on?
I don't know that we really had to face anything that was tough. It was a 3-year process of hiring people, and we put a lot of effort into getting really good people, and setting up the government, acquiring the use of real estate. It was all the tiny little details that took up a lot of time. And at one point, we literally had a council meeting every single day, including Sundays, 11 days in a row.
Wow. Now, when I first moved here with my wife, with Jerry, in 1990, when we bought the radio station, George Caravella was our city manager.
Yes.
Was he the first?
He was the first permanent city manager. And we, oh my goodness, I can't even remember the name of the man at the moment, but we hired a retired city manager who had been around and had helped several other cities and and I can't remember precisely whether it was Calabasas and one of the others that were forming at about the same time, and had served as temporary city manager for those people. So he was the one that helped us to set up the hiring process, advertising that we were a city, helping us to be discovered by the telephone company, because people would want to call the city of Santa Clarita and they didn't have a clue where we were or what we were.
Yeah, and I know that still was an issue when we first moved here in 1990. Carl Goldman with you. We are chatting with former Mayor Carl Boyer, learning about the history of Santa Clarita. Carl wrote a book back in 2005. That is, to me, the textbook history book of Santa Clarita, but a fun read as well to get to know our history, get to know our roots, just called Santa Clarita. And Carl Boyer, Boyer, is the author. We're going to be taking a short break right now. When we come back, we're going to learn about their first challenges, some of the big controversies that took place in Santa Clarita in the early stages. Of course, talk about the 94 earthquake and maybe look into the future as well. It's your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS 98.1 FM.
If you're in danger of losing your home to foreclosure, you need an expert. Hi, I'm Rich Sherman with Alta Realty. I've helped hundreds of Santa Clarita residents save their homes completely for free. I've got just over 20 years experience and a loan modification success rate of over 80%. I can negotiate better terms with your bank, and I can save your home from foreclosure. And again, we do this completely for free. So if you're in any danger, please call me today at 661-714-1400. That number again is 661-714-1400. I'm Rich Sherman with Alta Realty, and I'll be happy to help you save your home for free.
My tile is 20 years old, and it makes my house look 20 years old.
For quality custom kitchen, bath, and tile, trust the professionals at Southern California Tile.
Hi, I'm Bob of Southern California Tile, and I invite you to come look at the wide selection of tile and stone at our showroom. We offer you personalized one-on-one service and help you see the many beautiful possibilities for improving your home.
Get some style at Southern California Tile.
In Placerita, by the entrance to Masters College.
Facey knows life gets busy. Let us go to work for you in the Santa Clarita Valley. We have 34 primary care physicians and 55 specialty doctors in 4 offices. And Facey has easy 24/7 online appointment scheduling for PCPs and PEDS with some extended hour appointments available. We are Facey Medical Group. Let us go to work for you today. For more information or to make an appointment, visit facey.com. That's FACEY.com.
Come join me, Arif Halby, for Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. Every Tuesday at noon, we uncover ways to help you manage your money, get out of debt, and prepare for your retirement. That's every Tuesday at noon on Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. Are you not sure if you can retire yet? Listen to us and learn about tips for savings, retirement strategies, and so much more. That's every Tuesday at noon on Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour on your hometown station, KHTS.
At the Burrito Factory, their motto has always been to serve quality food with fast, friendly service. But did I mention the taste? When it comes to authentic taste and huge mouth-watering burritos, the Burrito Factory is second to none. Whether it's lunch, dinner, or a catered event, Burrito Factory has the taste of Mexico to satisfy your craving. Burrito Factory on Soledad Canyon Road next to Chi-Chi's Pizza in Canyon Country. Stop in or call ahead 288-0222.
KHTS. Now FM 98.1 FM and AM 1220. Your hometown station.
Carl Goldman here on your hometown station. We're chatting with Carl Boyer, one of the original city council members, founder of Santa Clarita, one of the founding fathers of Santa Clarita. And in this day and age, we also had a lot of women involved in Santa Clarita as well. We were just chatting during the break about Ruth Newhall, who to me is one of my heroes, and certainly we can all be thankful that Santa Clarita is the way it is because of a lot of Ruth Newhall's efforts in there. Don't you agree with that, Carl?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And she was also the moving force behind the Historical Society. She realized that although the Valley had a real history, that if the people didn't realize that there was a history, why would they think about forming a city?
Exactly. The challenges you had early on, once cityhood took place. To me, the first one, when we moved here in 1990, the first one I became aware of and the one we became involved with was Ellesmere Canyon. Was that the first major issue as a city, or were there some that prior to that?
We didn't even find out about Ellesmere Canyon until Ruth Bonnell answered my question, well, why won't you let this piece of forest remain in our city? Why are you taking it out? And she said, well, it's going to be a dump.
And when you say a dump, it was going to be the largest dump in
the world, in
Southern California. And it was going to, for those who don't know where Ellesmere is, it's right off of Placerita, right near the Placerita Nature. Actually, right here off of Railroad. It's where Railroad and now Newhall Avenue ends off the other side, the south side of the 14 freeway.
And what I realized from years and years of driving back and forth between our home in Newhall and going down to San Fernando High School, where I was teaching full time for the bulk of my career, including all the time that I was on the city council, that was the place where we got the most rain. There were times it would rain there when it wouldn't be raining in the valley or down in the San Fernando Valley. And so basically, I saw that as being a major source of our water supply.
And also, of course, now we see it's a giant piece of what's become open space, and the whole concept of surrounding Santa Clarita and the Valley with open space, that would not have existed.
And now it's owned by the city.
Right, and the amount of dump trucks coming through, particularly up that grade, up the 14, would have been mind-boggling. And that was a big fight. That was a fight similar to Cemex, where everyone said, there's no way you're going to win. There's not a chance you can win it. Coming from the city perspective, this is a done deal. Don't even try fighting it. And yet the city fought it.
We had some really good people in Washington who were representing our interests and kept us in touch with what was going on there. And so finally, they worked up a deal with the Senate, I think it was Natural Resources Committee or some such, where they would have a hearing, and the hearing happened. I mean, nobody showed up except the chairman, and Buck McKeon was invited to sit up on the dais because he was there, and I was the only one that testified, or maybe there was somebody from the dump people that testified also, but I don't think so. At any rate, we had a hearing, and I gave it my best shot, representing the people as mayor of the city. And a little while later, there was a piece of legislation that was inserted into a very popular bill, and Ellesmere Dump was basically outlawed. I didn't know what was going on at the time. Nobody knew what was going on at the time, except I think Buck McKeon and the chairman of the Senate committee and our
two
people.
senators at the time, Dianne Feinstein and Barbara Boxer, were instrumental in that too.
They were
helpful. I'll say.
They were helpful, but basically, what had been agreed upon with the people from Natural Resources was that they would put this into the legislation, and all of a sudden, Ellesmere was a done deal on our side.
One of the traditions we started, the KHTS April Fool's joke, actually started with Ellesmere. It goes all the way back to that. And back then, Gail, our city public information officer, and I were having lunch together, and I came up with this idea of doing an April Fool's joke that was a theater of the mind where the dump had actually opened, and the city did a grand opening. We had the Artists Association there doing it. We created a concert where the Rolling Stones were going to be performing, and that ended up winning some national awards thanks to a cooperative effort. But that was a fun event, and actually the start of our April Fool's jokes. And I know that didn't solve the problem of the dump, but it created an awareness for everybody out here to understand how critical it was for us to defeat that.
Of course, that's always the key to getting things done, is making the people aware so that more people will telephone their representation and write letters.
So Ellesmere, we go back to the early 90s with our former mayor, Carl Boyer. Ellesmere was the first of our major crises here as a city. The second was the 1994 earthquake. You were on the city council at the time. We were running the radio station. Both of us were heavily involved during that 6-7 months of the initial crisis and the recovery. I'd like to hear about it from your perspective.
Well, I got bounced around at 4:30 in the morning, as did my wife. I rolled over and rolled on top of my wife, which probably would have crushed her if something had come down on top of us. But I was trying to protect her, and then I looked up at the corner of the room, and I could see that nothing in the corner was moving. So I thought, okay, our house is going to be fine. We didn't have any furniture that was an immediate threat, although we could hear tremendous noise as the bridge on I-5 came down.
Right, for those who aren't aware, the I-5 and the 14, that overpass fell down, sealed off Santa Clarita, and part of the challenges, just to set this up for a second, part of the challenges were the drama was down in Northridge because buildings were falling down and fires were taking place, whereas up here in Santa Clarita, we'd have cracks in buildings were condemned, but the drama, other than the 5 and 14 that went down, was not here. So no media was covering what was going on in Santa Clarita, and yet as you look back, the total damage in Santa Clarita was more severe than down below in terms of dollars.
Yeah.
And we were sealed off. We were a commuting society back then, and yet commuting down to L.A. was impossible.
Well, I said to my wife, honey, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to go to City Hall and help out. So after about 15 minutes, I was dressed and gone, and she had to tend with the fact that we had a house that was just an absolute mess because everything had come down off the walls and bookcases had gone over and everything. So I got to City Hall, found out that the most important things were pencils and paper. And that was because we had to keep track of the money we were going to spend on the earthquake recovery. It became apparent very quickly that we would have a terrible time getting the word out to people. You were off the air, and so we were having meetings in a tent by City Hall because City Hall was unsafe, and I asked the City Council to name you as the official radio station of Santa Clarita, and pardon me, but somebody said, well, nobody listens to it. And I said, I guarantee you they will. And I got on the telephone about the time that you got back on the air, which was a rough, a hard thing for you to do. But you got back on the air. I got on the telephone. I called, and I asked to be put on the air. And I said to the people that were listening, and I think there were quite a few actually, I'm going to ask you to go up and down the streets, tell all your neighbors that we're back on the air and that they're going to find out all the information about the earthquake and the recovery in Santa Clarita from you. And I'm quite sure that your ratings went sky high.
Yeah, we had 6 months of all earthquake all the time. That could be its own radio show, and someday we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But that was quite an experience. When we first got back on the air, we had no idea what we were going to do, and the phones started ringing, and the phones stayed that way for the 6 months until the 514 went back up. We should definitely devote an entire show to the earthquake, but we don't have that much more time. I wanted to touch upon a couple of the other issues that became major ones here. And of course, during that time, just around that time, we ended up getting the mall, the only mall
Yes.
that came in. At the time, became Westfield, but the Valencia Town Center. And I know Newhall Land was very much part of that, and that was part of the original development. And the city cooperated, and it was a joint venture to get that mall up and going. But that was a giant step in the history of Santa Clarita as well.
That was something that we had been waiting for a long time. I had been asking Newhall Land back at the time that we were trying to form the county, when are we going to have a mall? Because I saw that as a major source of taxation. And
not just taxation. I mean, back when we first moved, you had Kmart, you had Target, and you had Mervyn's.
And you had to go down to the valley if you were going to do any serious shopping, which was no fun.
Absolutely. So getting that mall in was instrumental. Whitaker Burmite and Cemex, to me, were two other issues that still remain issues today. So been going on for decades. Why don't you talk a little bit about that from your perspective in the early stages of the city?
Well,
and let me backtrack to set up. So let's start with Whitaker Burmite, which is in the center of Santa Clarita, and back during World War II, they made munitions there. So there's toxic waste there because back then they did the 3 Bs. They burned the stuff, they blew it up, or they buried it.
Yeah, it was a classic brownfield, just very dangerous, toxic materials throughout. I believe it was 960 acres or
right, and it's
something
right
of that
smack
sort.
in the center of
Right
Santa
in
Clarita.
the center, prime land, and also the problem was that we couldn't build roads across, and we were desperately trying to figure out how to get traffic moving, which has always been a problem, and we couldn't build roads across this toxic area. We finally adopted a policy that there would not be any development up there until the entire site was cleared. I'm not sure that maybe we should have modified that a little bit after a while, but I'm hoping now that it's going to get clearance quite soon.
And for those who don't know exactly where it is, as you go now up Golden Valley, you can see where the new sheriff's station is coming in. That's right on the edge of the property over there. Golden Valley got extended and pushed all the way through, and the eventual plan, once Whitaker Burmite is cleaned up, is as you go down Via Princesa will continue on past where it is right now and become a connection down into Railroad.
Yes.
And so we're hoping that will happen over time. Cemex has been around for quite some time. The concrete landfill, the mega mine that also would have a significant environmental impact on Santa Clarita. That's been a long uphill fight. Again, everyone said it's a David against Goliath. There's no way the city will stop it, and it's still stopped. But it's been an issue since you've been around.
Not only
the
the blasting, but the dust and all the pollution in the atmosphere, but also the trucks. Nobody really understands that when a truck enters a freeway, cars are going to kind of yield the right of way because they don't want to tangle with a big truck. And when a car slows down, the car behind it slows down a little bit more, and ultimately, maybe half a mile back, traffic comes to a stop. And the 14 would be in a disastrous situation if that Cemex thing was built.
So during your time on City Council, we're talking with Carl Boyer, former mayor, one of the original members of City Council on the City Council from the formation of the city in 1987 until you retired in 98, is that correct?
98, yes.
And so 11 years on the City Council, a long time. During that time, as you look at all of these crises, which one do you think stands out the most out of all of them?
Well, the most important thing actually is the one that was least outstanding from the point of public appreciation, and that was forming the city government.
Right.
Just the huge number of tasks that had to be accomplished.
Looking ahead, it's now 2018. We're about to hit 2019. Hard to believe, and the city is now matured quite a bit.
Right.
And our population, as I said, has now grown to 300,000 in the unincorporated, counting the unincorporated area of the valley. It's north of 300,000 now. The city itself is some 220-something thousand. Where do you see the city heading? What do you see as some of the challenges in the future? What do you think Santa Clarita is going to look like 10 years from now, 11 years from now?
I think the things that really have to be addressed are the form of government. We need to go from citywide elections for each council member to district elections, because it is simply too expensive to have a democratic race for government. We need to have a mayor. An elected mayor who's going to be essentially looking at it as a major job, maybe 30 hours a week on average. When I was mayor and I was dealing with the dump situation, I had to make probably 24 trips to Washington, and that got to be really a burden. It was fine for my teaching, because I'd come back to the classroom and I'd be able to tell my government students, what was going on, and they got a real sense, I think more than any other class, of what government was like. But, a mayor needs to be known. Later on, when we were dealing with issues after my one-year term expired in 1996, we were still dealing with some of the people there, and our attorney just said, "Carl, don't mention the fact that your term of mayor is up. As far as they're concerned, you're still the mayor."
The challenge with that, and I hear what you're saying, I don't necessarily agree, nor do I disagree with what you're saying. We need to give that some more thought, but if you put a mayor in, how will that impact the city manager that really is the one operating the government at this point?
The city manager should be doing exactly what he's doing. The mayor is going to be doing the representation to other governments, to the county, to the federal government, to the various organizations, the Independent Cities Association, the Contract Cities Association. The people of this city really have no idea how many meetings we have to be involved in outside of the city limits.
So the mayor would be part of that meetings, and so the mayor, what you're envisioning is how the mayor have his or her own term. Let's just say 4 years. They would serve as mayor. Would they also then have a vote on the city council?
That would be up to what the ballot issue states.
You navigated that question or that answer like a pure politician, but what would you envision with that? Would the mayor have a vote, and if so, then you've got an even number, so you've got to add another city council member to
I wouldn't have any problem whatsoever with having another city council member or two, because of the size of our city. City council members are not paid a great deal, and it wouldn't be very expensive to enlarge the city council and cut down the size of the districts. But yes, personally, I would prefer that the mayor would have a vote.
My concern, and again, I don't disagree with you, but I don't agree with you either. My concern on the other side is, as we've looked at it from a political standpoint, an election standpoint, about 14% of the public, when city council was its own election, about 14% of the electorate voted for city council.
My feeling was that when we had that situation, that was a situation where the people who cared and probably were a little bit better informed would go to the polls. We were given the opportunity to extend our terms, which the present council did, and go to a November election, and we didn't because we felt if we were going to have to pay the county for an election, we might as well pay ourselves and have the city run the election and not have a huge deluge of uninformed voters voting for the incumbents.
And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing uninformed public voting for city council, and not really, the majority of them aren't sure who they're voting for or why they're voting. And so that's my concern. If you narrow it down into 5, 6, 7 geographic areas here in Santa Clarita, you're even narrowing that percentage who
But
can
then
vote.
we have a situation where the candidates can walk door to door.
And that's possible, yes. So as I said, there's positives and there's negatives to it on both sides of it. Getting people more informed, I think, is the key. As we grow, the future plans is to eventually have the entire valley kind of cap out at about 450,000 from the last time I looked at any of the planning. Do you think that's manageable?
I don't know what to tell you. I don't like it.
So what would be your sweet spot?
My sweet spot would be for the people of Castaic and Stevenson Ranch to join us now and have more of a say in what happens.
But then you still have Newhall Ranch that's getting developed. You still have the Pardee complex up Sierra Highway that's getting developed. You have others up in up Bouquet. So I think in the planning, we can't just put everything to a stop. It's being intelligent and finding that sweet spot, maybe between that 300,000 and 450,000.
The whole point of cityhood was not that we could stop development. We knew that we couldn't. There were Supreme Court cases that made it very, very clear back in the 20s. But we could make sure that the developers did the finest job possible and paid their fair share of.
And that's been the case. And when you can see how Canyon Country, the east side where we live and where the radio station for many years was, certainly wasn't planned and developed in the same thoughtful way that the west side of town was, with Valencia and Newhall Land under it. And now the city has done a great job of trying to patch that up and get Canyon Country up to the next level. And we see a number of things on the horizon that will continue to do that. We mentioned the open space and Ellesmere and having that vision and creating open space here in Santa Clarita and surrounding the valley so that we don't become another San Fernando Valley is also important. And then another thing, just to let all of us understand why local government is so important. As you drive, if you're listening right now and you're driving down Soledad, take a look over toward the north side and you see all of those solar panels up on the hillside that were put up by one of the local RV, actually the mobile home parks there. The owner of that home park put that up. He got that in there not because of the city. He got in there, the solar panels in there, because the state was able to dictate what could go in and what could not go in. And had he had to get city approval, there is no way would have looked the way it did. There's a ballot measure right now to try and do a similar thing with cell service and cell lines and cell poles and cell towers, and letting the state control that. And all we need to do is take a picture of what that looks like with the solar panels to realize we want the city to be able to decide whether they're going to want a fake tree in there in an inappropriate area or not. But having city control over all of these things is critical, and we can just use the solar panels as an example of what happens when you let outside government try and make decisions that really impact the local community.
That was another one of the battles that we almost got into, and Los Angeles, I think, caved before they irritated us too much, and that was with the idea of a lot of power towers coming through our area.
And that's been planned nicely over time, too, with that. So it's kind of a mixture. It's going to be interesting to see. Any final words planned for a second book?
I'm finishing up a book right now. It's called Medieval English Ancestors of Certain Americans, and I think that'll be my last book.
And one final question for Carl Boyer. You became very, very instrumental in creating sister cities for Santa Clarita and tying us in, connecting Santa Clarita with the outside world. You continue to do that.
I've been traveling. I have not been to either of our sister cities for a while, but believe me, it's an eye-opener for the people that do go.
Well, I want to salute you. I thank you so much for joining us. Carl Boyer, one of our original city council members. His book, Santa Clarita, is available. I encourage you to pick up a copy so that you can learn more about our history. It's been a pleasure. We'll bring you back again. Carl Boyer, our guest here on AM 1220 KHTS 98.1 FM, your hometown station.